Now from London is Andreas Krieg, a defence specialist from King's College. Thanks for being with us. Now the Saudis and their allies have made this extraordinary list of demands, anything from shutting down Al Jazeera to drastically scaling back ties with Iran, while removing Turkish troops from the country's soil. How do you think Doha is going to respond at the end of the day?
There is very little they can do. If you look at the very long list of different demands that were put in front of Qatar this morning, there are only maybe one or two that Qatar can actually address. But I think if you look at most of these demands, they're way too high. Some of them completely unrealistic. And even though you tend to go into negotiations with way too high demands, hoping that you might get a little bit less, these demands are completely out of proportion. And I think there is no real attempt here by the UAE or by Saudi Arabia to actually give Qatar even the chance to find a negotiated deal. It's pretty much a set list, and which kind of says you have to abide by all of these demands or else. And we still don't know what else means. In reality, closing down Al Jazeera, responding to, changing its domestic policy, changing its foreign policy with Turkey, basically means that Qatar is stripped of its sovereignty. And that is obviously something that the sovereign state cannot be expected to do. And no other sovereign nation would probably do that. So it's very hard, if not impossible, I think, for Qatar to actually respond to this.
But it is placing, isn't it, unprecedented pressure on the Qataris?
Absolutely, there is unprecedented pressure, at least in terms of soft power. If you understand, though, how Qatar has reacted quite successfully in the last 2.5 weeks to this embargo by finding alternative ways to importing goods, by trying to find new ways to get building supplies and food supplies into the country, actually, it has all not been as bad as anticipated. Actually, Qatar has proven to be a lot more resilient than what most analysts considered 2.5 weeks ago. So I think the pressure is on, but Qatar is now at a place where they can sustain the pressure, and they're willing to sustain the pressure because they know if they bend, if they give in, basically their entire narrative that they have supported, which is one of freedom, which is one of freedom of speech, pluralism, inclusive governance, this is at risk. And it doesn't only risk Qatar, but it risks Oman, it risks Kuwait and other smaller states in the region who are bullied by the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. So it's very important for Qatar not to give in to that pressure.
Andreas, then you've got the US policy towards Qatar, which so far has been marked by what one could describe as confusion. On one hand, you've got President Trump appearing to take credit for the Saudi embargo, but on the other hand, by absolute complete contrast, you've got the State Department who's been questioning the Saudis' true motives in sparking this crisis. I imagine this is not helping an extremely tense situation in the region.
Absolutely. I think one of the conditions that prepared this crisis were Trump's remarks during the Riyadh summit a month ago. And I think the important thing is to remember that the State Department, as well as the Defense Department, so Tillerson and Mattis, who are the main drivers of foreign and security policy in the United States in this administration, have actually taken quite a different view to Qatar, being a lot more sympathetic to the position of Qatar, and also having met this pressure from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates with disbelief. And I think this is the general view in the public in Europe, and especially in governments in Europe and the United States, that they're trying to find a diplomatic solution because they don't think that it's justified to put pressure, unprecedented pressure on Qatar for something that seems to be just about trying to achieve political interest rather than tackling very, very urgent US interests, which is containing ISIS. Actually, if you look at the list of demands, it has actually nothing to do with fighting terrorism. It has nothing to do with containing Iran. And in that way, it doesn't serve US interests. Quite on the contrary, actually, it undermines. Disunity in the GCC undermines very, very important US interests in the region.
Andreas Krieg, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.